You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical.
Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today that you already heard from. And we talked about doing a part 2 because we were not able to cover all of the information that we want to do in the first part. So she's back for part 2. I'm going to turn it over to her so she can reintroduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Yeah, hello, I'm Sara Aranel. And yeah, as Steph has already said, we've already spoken because, I'm very talkative when I come to the topics that I'm passionate about. So that's me. And I love everything natural and a bit witchy and spiritual, and also with a mixture of very grounded science. So I think we're gonna talk a bit more about things like that today. And you can find me mainly on Instagram, but also on Facebook, and lately also a little bit on TikTok. That's me.
Wonderful. Listeners, I'll have everything linked in the show notes as always, witchwednesdays.com. And I will have that first episode linked as well, so you can check that out in case you missed it. But that was really popular because I think everybody liked what you had to say, especially the lineup of when it fell. Coming up to Lunasa, because I think that was a holiday that a lot of people struggle with like understanding and working with that energy when it's, Letha and Mabon tend to be more straightforward, and then Lammas just kind of falls in the middle there, and everybody's like, what do I do with this? And I think you had a really great explanation for that.
Yeah, I'm very happy to open such topics that not everyone's quite familiar with. And I have to say that, at the beginning, those festivals in between were also kind of a mystery to me as well. So they were actually the ones that I focused the most at the beginning. And it was really quite magical when I saw that they also make so much sense. So I'm really happy that people found something new in our conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, it helped even myself, but I think it made people, more excited for that one, and then for those other cross-quarter ones that are coming up. I mean, I just love celebrating in general, so I'm happy to learn more about all of the various holidays. But yeah, I know people enjoy that. I think people had some follow-up and new questions to bring to that. So I think one of the follow-up questions or directions was just to ask, in your opinion, if you had like a 1 or 2 sentences like you did for Lunasa, of like what the energy is for all of the holidays. That was one of the questions I got.
Oh my God, only 2 sentences on that?
I know. They were like, if you can just sum it up in 1 or 2 sentences of what kind of energy we're looking for. I was like, oh man, I could sum it up in 24 sentences. I don't know what to do.
Okay, let's try this. Where do we start with? I guess Lunasa, let's say, because we've already talked about that. So to me, Lunasa is grounding from the world outside, bringing the energy inside and focusing them again. Then Mabon, to me, is very much about gratitude. And to me personally, it's also very much about beauty, because everything gets so beautiful in this time of year. And also creating on that focus that you said in Lunasa before. And then Samhain, well, for most witches, it's like the witches' main festival. But for me, it's time of really turning on the inside, and then getting in touch with passing, with letting go, also with death and void. To me, it's also about grief and void. Then Yule, it's stillness. To me, it's something that we struggle the most in this society. Just finding that sacred space inside you where you can actually be still, doing nothing, focusing on nothing. And then in Invoke, it's about the time in between when there are potentials, but you still don't know about them exactly. And how do you handle that? Not having a clear vision. That is also quite a struggle in this modern society. And then Ostara is about rebirth, focusing again, but on the outside. And then also, that excitement of the beginning. It's kind of like really the maiden that is very, everywhere. And then next one is Beltane. It's pleasure, it's sexuality, it's very flesh, like bodily, sensual festival to me. And then Litha is everything is shown, because you have the big sun on the sky and everything is shown and it's outside, but it's also like recreating yourself with the influences of the outside world. So re-questioning what you believe, what you already know, and then reshaping yourself so that you can be truer and that you can mature. And then we're back to Lunasa, I guess. Yeah. Not two sentences.
That was fantastic. That was so much better than I could have done.
There was a bit of pressure.
I think you answered that question perfectly. That question came from Kristen. So Kristen, I hope you got all of your questions answered there in your 1 or 2 sentences. But I think that was really helpful and much better than I could have done. But I agree with your assessment there. I usually have like a lot of celebratory feelings that go along with Yule, but that stillness really is a tough part of that holiday, or like my practice in general. I think we just do not like to be still and just be alone with our thoughts. Could be a little bit scary.
Oh yes, very scary. And yeah, I guess, every festival has so many topics that you can, find out more about in that part of the year. And to me, I have to stress this out. It's not just about one day. It's about the whole period, when you can really dig in, dive deeper. So I guess I also like the topics that are more of a challenge, because they usually teach you the most, about life, about yourself. And I also really like to re-question everything. So when you have this opportunity to dive into something that you're maybe not completely comfortable with, or that you don't know much about, then there's so much potential for exploration and for, making yourself a bit better. So yeah, of course, in you can also do all those celebratory stuff, like, the lights and the greenery and all the beautiful things that you can absolutely do in that part of the year. But then those are the sweet parts, and I'm absolutely not against them. I love them, and we should soak them in, like really experience that, because that's something that life has given to you as a present. But then on the other side, you can find the maybe more quiet presence that can really enrich you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the other questions that came up that were related to this topic, but also just in general. We talked about your teaching and incorporating kids, and a lot of people had questions of what age is appropriate to start talking about this with kids, and how do you start talking to them about these pagan, anything that your beliefs, and the pagan like sabbats and holidays and wheel of the year. How do you go about practicing that with children, and when?
Okay, so I'm not a parent, but for instance, I do have a nephew that is 2.5 years at the moment. And I was also a teacher in a kindergarten. So I worked with children from 11 months on. and mainly in the beginning of primary school. So to me, it's not so much about really teaching them, like, okay, let's sit down and let's talk about this. It's about getting them into this context that you already live. Because when you have a child, when a child comes into a family, they come into a certain context, into certain values and views and ways of doing things. And that is the strongest of teachings. Teaching is mainly not about you telling children, it's about setting the example and setting the vibe. And just by them feeling what they're receiving from you and what their surrounding is like, they already understand what the things are all about. So I would say that it's not about you telling them, okay, now we are celebrating this because of this and this and this, and in this particular way, when they're still very young. Because, like, for instance, if a child is, I don't know, 2 years old, they are very talkative. Well, they may potentially be already very talkative, but it's not about them, okay, like, I really need to talk. Mom, please talk to me about this and this. No, they're experiencing, they're copying, they're following your example. And that's the true magic. And that is the knowledge that will go into their bones, into their very core. It's something that they will always have with them, because that will be so deeply ingrained into their subconsciousness and into their worldview, that everything will come out of this context that they soaked in when they were really young. And then later on, they will probably just start questioning things. They will ask you when they're 6 or 7. They will be the one that will bring out the topics like, so what's this celebration about? Or maybe, why exactly are we doing this at this time of year? Or maybe even the topics like, so Mom, can you tell me more about death? Like, where do people go after death? And this is already this context that is very much connected to these festivals, because these festivals to me are about the basic things in our lives. It's about the basic topics that regulate our lives. So to me, I would say that it's never too early, but you always need to adjust how you communicate things with children according to their interest and their capabilities and their age. But that's up to the individual child, because to certain child, those things will be very relevant when they're 5, and to certain children, they won't be very relevant till they're teenagers, when they really start questioning, why exactly am I following certain traditions or certain rituals? So it really depends. And I think that with children, it's always the main lesson with children is, when you think about how to work with them, it's just observe them, be very respectful to who they are, and then adjust things to their needs and their interests, because that's the way they will feel seen and heard. And those are the basic needs. And when you fulfill those basic needs, that's when you touch their interest and their heart. And that's when, the things sparkle in their consciousness. Yeah.
So would you say in, your work with children or with your nephew, that this seasonal living and the cycles of the Sabbat might be a good place to start?
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, let's just give the example because that's usually the things that people understand the most. So, yeah, like, of course, that is most understandable because it's concrete, it's not something fictional. So when I was a teacher in first grade, before I even met those children that I worked with, I questioned myself, what are the basic things that I want to pass on to the children. And to me, being a teacher is not just passing the knowledge that you need to pass on because the state is saying so. Mostly it's about being there for children, like being a guardian of their souls, of who they are, and giving them a safe space and giving them inspiration so that they will know that this place, the world, is a good place to be and that they can fulfill, themselves in this place. And you are the guardian of that space where they can find their path. So on this path, the things that they will absolutely need the most are not the things that they will find in books. It's the things that they experience in relationship with people that surround them. So me as a teacher, as a person, as a grown-up that is supporting them, it's up to me to give them those core values, so the supportive communication, the sense of safety, the sense of being heard and seen, the sense of being loved, and to be a part of a group of people that support you and love you. Those are the core things that they will need, no matter what path they choose in their lives. They will need those basic things. So how I wanted to pass those things to children was through these small rituals, because I wanted them to know that they belong to this greater place that is called nature, or just our cycles of life on this world, because that's something that they will be able to get the power from in 20, 30, 40 years. Because if they will know that this place, world, is kind, is good, and is a place where they can find the power for themselves, they will be always able to go there and seek it for themselves. So I would tell my pupils for certain things, like, okay, so today we are celebrating, let's say, Yule. But it's not about telling them, so this is Yule and you need to remember this name of the day. It's about, so what's going on around us? We see how, that, for instance, in my part of the world, it's the time with no leaves on the trees and of long nights. And then there's this magical thing that happens when the night is the longest. And what can we observe inside of us because of this rhythm that surrounds us? And those are the things that children really feel so deeply, and they love it because it makes sense, because it gives sense to the place that they are inhabiting. So it's not about me sitting down with them and telling them about the certain rituals. It's about me creating the space that they will be able to feel and then find magic and wisdom inside of it. And children at this age, they really love making sense of things, making sense of our relationships, of how we act, and also what's going on around us. So I would, for instance, in the dark times of the year, I wouldn't even light the main lights in the classroom, so that we could be able to observe how the sun rises. And this will show them, oh, so we need to go slower now in this part of the year. And we can take more time to sit in the morning. It was like a morning corner that we had in the classroom, and we could cuddle more, and we could read more stories, and, just staying together, because this is something that nature supports us in this part of the year. And then when the days were longer, we would spend more time outside playing and, just being scattered around, because the world was inviting us. So through these rituals, they would see, oh, my surrounding makes sense. And it gives me some impulses that I can use so that my life is better and simpler and more supported. So that is the way I pass these things on to children. And the thing is also that, we live in a world with many different beliefs and faiths and stuff like that. I'm a very non-religious person, but I say that I'm very spiritual because, yeah, it's just who I am. Doesn't matter. But the thing is that if you're a teacher, you work with children of many different backgrounds. And now, if I would be passing on, like really concrete terms, like you need to believe in this and this, and you need to call it like this and this, then parents probably wouldn't really accept that. But if I present this as it's following the cycles of nature, is making sense of the rhythm that we are a part of, every parent will love that. So parents would often tell me, like, I know more about the phases of the moon now than I did ever before. And they loved it. So it really fits into every belief and every system and every worldview.
It does, and that's how I learned myself when I look back at, my witchy journey versus my religious journey. I can just tell the difference in how I feel about things now is based on how I was taught them back then. And the religion that I learned in school was very much that, here's what you believe, you're just reciting it, like I had no reason for it. Whereas my mom was the one teaching me all about the cycles of nature. And we were making, pomanders at Yule with the oranges and sticking the clothes in there. And then every spring and early summer, we would take a drive to go find lilac bushes. And like all of those cyclical things that were happening was all because of my mom. And those are the things that I still observe today and have like great memories associated with. So that's absolutely how I learned best as a kid.
Yes, exactly. And children really, they really vibe with it. Like naturally, they are drawn to this and they love it. And they will definitely not resist you in that because it's something that they can actually experience. It makes sense. And that is like the bottom line with children. It needs to make sense. You need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then present it in a very physical way, because that's the only way that they will understand it, but not only with their mind, but with their whole being. And then they will just spontaneously do it because it supports them. And I think we should learn a lot about our view of education and rearing children and everything like that through this lens. What makes sense? It's not what your idea is, but what does really make sense now and here, and for the life that is coming for these children, because you don't know what they will be doing, or they will need like knowledge, like something that you can really teach them from the books and stuff. You don't know what exactly they will need, but they will need this wisdom of life. They will need the support of life, of these cycles. They will just need to, live here in this world, in very physical, but also very spiritual world. And if you can show them this, what's the magic in this, they will spontaneously take it and then also bring it in whatever situation they will be in later on in life. And that is the greatest support that you can give them, because it's empowerment. It's not, I'm telling you something and you need to reproduce this now in the way that I said. It's, here you have the tools, but now you can use the tools however you want. That's empowerment. And that's the knowledge and the wisdom that really makes sense. That the only knowledge that really makes sense, because it's completely applicable. Now, even if they moved to another part of the world that have maybe different cycles or, whatever, they will be able to observe where they are and soak in the new impulses, and information from their surroundings, and they will be able to adjust, and they will be able to see beauty and support in wisdom in that environment. So it's completely applicable. It's not something that ties you to a certain situation. It's something that gives you power in whatever situation you find yourself in. And that is something that is really valuable for children, and really makes sense to give to children at the beginning of their life journey.
And I think it makes sense too to a lot of adults and how we're learning now. And if we're, relearning these things, or maybe learning them for the first time, if we weren't taught these cycles as kids, it's kind of how we approach things even now that just makes sense. So we can see these cycles happening over and over again, and we can see how they're reflected both, the outside and in our own inner lives, in our own inner worlds. Like, we just follow the cycles of nature. It makes sense.
Yes. And then also, if you're a teacher, and obviously you need to pass certain topics to children, it depends on what exactly you need to pass on to them, according to which part of the world, which state and which system you're in, or how old the children that you're working in are. You can actually just wove these ideas, like, as I said before. So before we even started our journey together, I went through this thought process of what are the basic things, like what is the baseline that I want to pass on to the children. But now out of this, I can apply it to whatever I want. So I can, for instance, so it was first grade, so we needed to learn about, let's say, alphabet, for instance. So we got to know the letters of the alphabet through the plants that we find in our surroundings. So the first letters of each plant was the letter that we were getting to know. And then usually we would also make something with this plant. It really depended on which plant it was. So if it was something edible, we would prepare tea out of it, for instance. Or if it was ivy, for instance, that is poisonous to eat, we would make, it's such a hard word for me in English. It's wreath, right? The one that you hang on the door then. Yeah. I never know exactly how to pronounce it. Yeah. So it really depends on what you want to create then with children. And then probably if they were older, we could do something more complex. But you can really apply it to whatever you want. You can also make longer projects. For instance, we had certain situations when some of the children were a bit like not really the kindest to each other. And then we made this longer project of how to serve each other and how to support each other. And this was all inside of this concept of, how life is supporting itself. So it really depends. And it's a very creative space that you can find yourself in, and you can express yourself so much through it. And I think that is the nicest part of being a teacher, because you have so much space to be creative and to pass on the most beautiful things from life to the next generations. So as I said at the beginning, it's always about observing children, what they need. Because, for instance, once I worked with a group of children that were very, very, very childrenish, or how to say it. So even in the first grade, they were still very much into playing as princesses and unicorns and stuff like that. So that was the creative space for this group of children. And they were very much into singing. So I would sing pretty much everything to them. Like, we need to tidy up the room, I would sing it out. because that's what they registered. That's what they noticed. But then with another group of children, they would completely ignore those kind of approaches. And they were like, oh my God, why are you singing? So that really didn't work with them. But they were very much into storytelling. So we did everything through stories. So again, you can learn about these things about nature and the cycles through music, or with other group of children, you can tell stories, or you can play it out through different games or whatever. There's just so much you can do with children. And it's really important that you believe in it, that you're authentic, because then they will accept it. If you put yourself into a situation that you don't believe in, they will absolutely not accept it. They will completely ignore it or even make jokes out of it because they are very upfront. They will tell you, they will show you. Yeah.
You can always count on kids to tell you exactly
definitely.
what they're thinking.
Definitely. And that's really a nice thing, because just think, you can work with the adults, and you can spend hours and hours on something, and only after days or months realize that they completely hate what you're doing. But so you spend so much time and energy on something that gives absolutely no positive results to the people that you're working with. But then when you work with children, they will just show you, and you're like, okay, pass. We're not continuing with this. Let's switch to something else.
But you know what? I really appreciate that. And I wish that more adults did that, because we would waste a lot less time.
Yes, definitely. You gotta love children for what they're teaching us, because, they're teaching us about such basic things in life, the things that we all need. Just be authentic, be true, just tell me what you think, and be playful and be a bit crazy from time to time, be creative. Those are all the elements that we as human beings need, no matter how old we are. But yeah, we've been taught about certain really crazy stuff in this really crazy society that we live in. Now we need to rethink everything and reconsider. And there's so much creativity that we can use in the process. It's really limitless. We can do whatever we want pretty much at this point. But let's just go down to the basics. So what are the core values that we want to follow? Okay, so these are the core values. Now, what do we want to create out of it? And those are the things that children are teaching us all the time. If only we give them some attention, and if we're open to suggestions, if we're not like, oh, I'm the authority and you need to listen to me, they will never vibe with that. Definitely not.
No. You know what? I don't either.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Even now as an adult, I don't want people to talk to me that way. So I didn't when I was a kid either.
Yes. So that's another thing that we need to reconsider. Do we really want to go on like this? No, we don't actually. So let's just change it. No hard feelings, honestly. We've experienced certain things as a society. Now we learned that it doesn't work. Let's just change it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that I think answered all of the questions that came in about incorporating kids and how to teach them. And I think that is really great advice of just letting them be a part of nature and not having to make it complicated. We are just seeing what's around us and observing that and including kids in that. It's really that simple.
Yes, and I would want to stress out also that you don't need to be in a very natural or rural part of the world in order to do that. Like, for instance, for a while I taught in an industrial place. It was really not charming, and there was not much nature around us. But you can bring nature inside, for instance, so you can forage things and bring them into the classroom. I also spent quite a few years in a Waldorf system, so I would always decorate the room with, let's say, seasonal fairies, and then I would sew small leaves or blossoms and stuff like that, and I would hang them on a branch that we had above our morning corner. Then you can make projects that bring the natural vibe inside the classroom. Or, for instance, I also wanted to make our classroom a really safe and sacred place. So every day before we started, before children even got into the classroom, I would meditate. I would also greet the classroom and thank her for everything that she's given us. It was a she for me because in Slovene it's also a form of word that is a she. So yeah. So I would always communicate with the space. It's like, what do you need at this moment? Every afternoon before I left it, I also checked the energy in the air. So if it needed some cleansing, I would do smudging. Yeah, we would always start very slowly in the morning. So before I got in, I took the train to my workplace. So I would always listen to the right music before I even got to the school. And then in the classroom, I would put on some light, nice music so that it created this nice atmosphere. I would light the candles and things like that. In the dark time of the year, I would always put on some resin so that it also cleansed the place in that way. And I would always also explain to the children that it's not some woo-woo thing, that it actually also physically works on, like germs and stuff like that, so that they would understand that smudging and resins and essential oils and stuff like that, it's not something strange, but it's something that also physically helps us maintain health and, nice atmosphere. So they really understood this concept. So it's really much about this very energetic work that you do on the place that you inhabit. And that is also what children feel, and they respond to it. So sometimes we would, even when we saw in the middle of the day that the things are not going okay, we would open the windows, we would move a little bit, we would do certain rituals. Then sometimes we would also put on some essential oils and stuff like that, so that they would also physically feel the change in the atmosphere and how we were functioning.
That's fantastic. That's such great information. Thank you so much for sharing everything and being back for a part 2 and answering everyone's questions. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule again to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to do that. I really love sharing, these ideas. And to me, pedagogy, I really love the thought that pedagogy is not a science, it's an art. So you always need to just observe the dynamics and create as you go. And I think it can become so beautiful, and you can experience such amazing, such deep, profound experiences.
And that is a beautiful sentiment to end on. Thank you for being here. And listeners, that is everything that I have for you this week, and I will see you all next week. Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.